It's a pleasure to be back here after so long. So, I'm going to start now. Some scholars, let's move this, some scholars, like David Lehman, Erich Neumann, start outlining a pattern for both aspects of the major great mother, or also the great goddess archetype. The good mother archetype, more creative, feminized aspect of the goddess, and on the other hand, the role model archetype, a more violent, death-related and masculinized aspect. Both archetypes would come to represent, respectively, the positive and negative elementary characters of the primordial goddess, a Euroboric primeval goddess that would contain both aspects. Okay, to draw the pattern for both archetypes, Neumann examined figures extracted from different myths around the globe that have the same recurrent predications in common. So, in the following minutes, and not to delay this too much, I'll focus on analysing two more figures from varying time periods and historical backgrounds in Irish literature, sharing traits reminiscent of the Tyrrell mother archetype. We'll delve into the figures of Countess Montorio in Charles Maturin's Fatal Revenge of the Family of Montorio, published in 1807, and Imelda from Eileen Case's Beneath Green Hills, a short story in the collection All Over Ireland, published in 2015, edited by the East Dawn member Deirdre Madden, both of which are regarded as masterpieces of Irish literature, past and present. So the more than 200-year gap between the two publications of these works provides insight into the enduring presence of the Tyrrell mother archetype, not only in the realm of Irish literature, but also within a broader cultural unconscious of Ireland and humanity as a whole. To analyse the archetype of the Tyrrell mother, we'll pay attention to the different traits present in all the figures in myth related to it, which in Ireland had a prominent representation in manifestations such as the war fertility triad, the Mórrígan. This is Bow, Macha, and the Mórrígan, of whom the latter plays some key roles in the Irish mythical cycles. These traits will showcase some of the destructive male attributes of the feminine, namely this petrifying look that can transfix and destroy their victims, and the deadly, or rather dead, upper womb, or the so-called, the vagina dentata. So, I don't know if you're familiar with, the novel and the short story, but just in case, Charles Maturin's Fatal Revenge, that's for short, okay, revolves around the story of the family of Montorio and the fall, or rather cancellation, of their house on the Italian island of Sicily. So the current Count of Montorio, who thought Horatio, his brother, and his family were dead, the original Count of Montorio and Countess and their children, usurping his position in the family house and title for more than 20 years before the plot of the novel takes place. Okay, so Horatio, who is totally devoted to his revenge, he's not dead, actually, travels to the Far East, where he studies and acquires the knowledge of the occult and supernatural. After that, she decides to return to Italy, to Naples and Sicily, to fulfill his revenge under pretense of being a monk called Father Scamoli, thus becoming Count Montorio's confessor, as he is now corroded by guilt and has turned to religious for solace. Horatio plans using the fascination with the supernatural the Countess family nurtured to seek his revenge, obtaining in this way a powerful influence over the Count's sons, Annibal and Ippolito, and making them kill their father, or potential father. Okay, the rest of the novel includes passages, dark corridors, churches, vanished corpses, ghosts, and all the props and paraphernalia of the Gothic novels of the time, including a subplot of Platonic romance, all of which are used by Maturin to reveal step by step the methods and plots Horatio uses to fulfill his plans of revenge. However, his revenge backfires in an unexpected turn of events when Horatio learns from the lips of his dying brother, spoiler included, who's just learned that Horatio and Father Scamoli are the same person, that Annibal and Ippolito, surprise, surprise, are in reality Horatio's own sons, who he believed to have been murdered at the time of the treason. The agony of such a revelation kills Horatio in a very dramatic way, and the two brothers, Annibal and Ippolito, run away from Castle Muralto. Now, Beneath Green Hills. So, Eileen Case's short story centers on a mother, Imelda, and her two daughters, Lucia and Joan, during a cold evening right before Christmas. The narrative seamlessly weaves together the present and moments from their family's past, mainly through Lucia's, Imelda's eldest daughter, memories. Imelda is bound to a wheelchair after suffering from a stroke, which makes her spend her life on the ground floor of her Dublin house, unable to access the first floor where her own bedroom is. As both Imelda and Lucia patiently wait for Imelda's younger daughter, Joan, to discuss about death and the recent neighbour feuds, with Nelson Mandela's death and subsequent funeral, and Imelda's potential funeral arrangements in the background as a recurring conversation topic between mother and daughter. After Joan's arrival with Imelda's new bedspread, Lucia walks upstairs and arranges Imelda's room. During this moment, she reflects on the memory of both her and Joan's witnessing their father kiss a stranger days before he abandoned them. The story concludes with Lucia walking back downstairs after taking a photo of the room for her mother and closing the blinds. So, going back to the Great Mother, so as Neumann points out, well, the Great Mother contains positive and negative male determinants aside from the predominant female elements, end of quotation. This results in the dark side of the terrible mother often taking dark aspects in various myths and legends worldwide. But now, in Irish folklore and myth, there are several famous instances of these, of which the most lasting could be the Mórrígan, the great phantom queen, the banshee of modern folktale, whose most terrifying imprint can be found in the Irish epic Táin Bó Cúailnge, the cattle raid of Cooley. This story, actually, what we find, and the most remarkable feature is Cuchulain's dead. Okay, this is the statue in the GPO, the General Post Office in Dublin, all right, where the Mórrígan, actually the shape of a raven, perched on Cuchulain's shoulder to show all his enemies from Connacht that he's dead, pretty much. So she's kind of, telling people of his death. So, one of the main attributes associated to this archetype is the prettifying look issuing from these figures. Okay, so if we think of this, well, the first mythological figure we think of is obviously the Medusa, who could literally petrify, all the men she looked upon. This petrification or rigidity is directly linked to death, for, well, as Neumann reminds us, and quote, to be rigid is to be dead, end of quote. Feature that will link the terrible mother to the other world somehow. From that perspective, the terrible mother figures are the great queens of, quote, perilous land of the dead through which the deceased must pass, end of quote. As Irish myth tells us, not only does the Mórrígan, the great phantom queen, actually, help the Tuatha Dé Danann at the battles of Maturin, but she's also, along with Macha and Ban, which actually Bow means crow in Irish, the, unquote, major triune goddess of war, death, and slaughter, end of quote. It's not surprising, therefore, that the myth of the Mórrígan has been kept alive in Irish folktale and tradition in the figure of the banshee, a female spirit who heralds the death of a family member, usually by screaming or wailing. The banshee can take multiple shapes, among which we found, obviously, the crow, okay, in Irish, bow. Therefore, the Mórrígan would come to be an embodiment of the terrible mother in Irish myth, placing her among Medusa or Kali. In the case of Countess Montorio, we don't see her actually petrifying anybody with her terrible look, maybe transfixing, yes, okay, but rather to show that sterility, icy death, and heartless stone-like soul that a great war queen would show. All through the novel, the reader can see how the Countess maintains that heart of stone as she does and feel remorse for the crimes committed, which is intensified as she often appears to confront her feelings, or a lack of them, with those of her husband, the Count, who is prey to remorse and nightmares. Well into the novel, there's a scene where the Count wants to talk to his wife about a letter he's just received from one of his contacts in Naples. In that letter, he's informed that the king's authorities are going to send some agents to investigate the alleged crimes that rumor says took place at Castle Moralto. In their conversation, the Count is openly worried about what they had done and the consequences of their actions, as, unquote, he pointed to the letter which lay on the table and covered his his face sunk back on his chair, end of quote. However, the Countess shows a coldness that can't freeze even her husband as she reads the letter with her mien unaltered. And you have there this long quotation there, okay, that you can read if you want. Okay, so right after this moment, okay, she says there's nothing to worry about because they have silenced everyone who knows about the crimes one way or another. The Countess's cold character is made even more patent as her husband hides his face and averts from mentioning the horrible crime they had committed. She accuses him of being weak and soft, if not even a hypocrite. And quote, "What is this weak and sickly waywardness that shrinks not at the deed, but at the name?" End of quote. Eileen Casey's Imelda, on the other hand, possesses an adamant determination that can put an end to conversation, just with the look of her eyes and a biting comment from her mouth. As Imelda's elder daughter, Lucia recalls Imelda's feud with her neighbour, Lucy Doran, over her cat crawling into her room and curling up on her bed, the bed she hasn't slept on for like 3 years or more. Okay, she feels, and quote, the warning look that rises briefly in her mother's eyes, end of quote. At Lucia's last desperate attempt at making her mother realize that even long-lasting enmities, and she specifically mentions the handshake between Obama and Castro, can reach an end. Okay, Imelda's terrifying look gave way to her venting as she spat that, being in the limelight, of course, Obama, and quote, wouldn't give a true penny toss otherwise, the two-faced git, end of quote. After which Lucia remarks that even, and quote, if Imelda's legs have become heavy as iron weighs, her tongue certainly hasn't, end of quote. Imelda's tongue matches perfectly her harsh and noisy voice, a voice that was, end quote, devoid of any feel, end of quote, when Lucia remembers how her mother talked to her back then when she was a child, okay, after their father left them. Another link that the troll mother archetype has to death is that of the negative aspect that some scholars call the upper womb, that is the lips, the birthplace of breath and the word, the logos. But the destructive side of the feminine, as Neumann mentions, and quote, the destructive and deathly womb appears most frequently in the archetypal form of a mouth bristling with teeth, end of quote, which some call the vagina dentata. In the same way, you can't forget the Mórrígan here, okay, the Irish war goddess, okay, when the Second Battle of Maturin killed the Fomorian leader Eileen by, unquote, depriving him of the blood of his heart and the kidneys of his veiler, end of quote, and later giving, quote, 2 handfuls of that blood to Jay Dannon before the battle, end of quote. The Countess' motive of the vagina dentata might be less obvious as, you know, like the Mórrígan, but still present. So if the upper one is the birthplace of breath and the word, that is, of life, okay, then in the case of the destructive side of the feminine, that would be the deathly inert womb. When examining the mother role of Countess Montorio along the story, we can see how she passes from being the illegitimate and assumed mother of both Ippolito and Annibal to being like their foster mother. We're kind of a strange stepmother, okay, like Cinderella's. When we, as readers, and they, both brothers, okay, discovered that Horatio's Scamoli children hadn't been killed, as you might remember, but rather taken by the Count and the Countess as their own. Therefore, we see that the Countess started as a mother who would have brought life, even if not a perfect mother, okay, to a woman whose womb not only cannot bring life, but brings death instead and destruction. So the image of an inert womb is intensified when we see that the Countess, to make her will stronger, and here you have this long quotation I'm going to avoid now, okay, so you can read it. Okay, so to make her will stronger and purge remorse in a sadistic strain wraps around her waist where her natural womb, even her heart, would be. A metal device with a piercing needle that brings a cankerous condition to her body, so parts of it have to be removed as a consequence. And you have this long quotation where she explains that in very nice language, okay, to her husband. If we think of Imelda, okay, in Beneath Green Hills, she's not see manipulating or playing with knives, needles, piercing needles. However, it is through Frank's description, if you remember, Lucia's husband, of her and her character as a battle axe, okay, that we get one of her clearest links to warring weaponry. The other clear link regarding Imelda's strong, warring, soldier-like almost character and her relation to weapons, even if not knives, strictly speaking, is the nickname she gives herself for some time, okay? Envisioning herself as a modern-day embodiment of the former San Francisco Police Department Chief of Detectives, Robert T. Ironside, from the eponymous late 60s, early 70s American TV series, Ironside. A veteran detective was forced to retire after a sniper's bullet bound him to a wheelchair. Not surprisingly, Joanne refers to her mother's death, or potential death at some stage, okay, as, and quote, when Imelda bites the bullet, end of quote. Clearly referring to the Hart Police Chief and the series, okay. Also, she makes her own connections, this is Imelda, okay, making her own connections to Nelson Mandela throughout the story, through his funeral and last rites. Like, probably one of the most remarkable ones refers to their resting place, okay, and title of cases, short story, Beneath Green Hills, as is the place where Mandela lies now, and where Imelda would like to lie, on her own green hills, okay, her own bed upstairs. That final resting place beneath Green Hills recalls the strong Irish beliefs surrounding the Sheeha, the fairy mounds spread all over Ireland, where the Tuatha Dé Danann, the old gods, and now the fairies, live. And obviously, the Mórrígan has her own, okay? So Rock Cruachan, okay, being the Mórrígan's dwelling and, a quote, famous entrance to the other world, end of quote. So to conclude, we've seen that both Countess Montorio in Charles Maturin's Fatal Revenge and Imelda in Eileen cases Beneath Green Hills share certain traits and characteristics with other embodiments of the Terrible Mother, most notably the Mórrígan. For instance, Imelda's power to command with a look or her icy voice, or Count Montorio's shock and petrification in the presence of his wife, the Countess. Furthermore, we notice their association with violence, or even their potential for violence, connecting them to the motif of the inert upper womb and the vagina dentata. Imelda's nicknames relating her to weapons, symbolizing the teeth of the Terrible Mother, as well as leading characters, or this archetype embodiment's willingness to use these sharp objects as tools of self-inflicted torture and murder, as exemplified by the Countess, underscore their menacing nature. Moreover, the theme of the barren womb is emphasized in the case of Count Montorio, as we come to realize that her supposed sons are, in fact, her nephews, okay, casting her as a twisted stepmother, foster mother figure. Ultimately, both Charles Maturin's Countess Montorio and Eileen cases Imelda serve as prime examples of the Terrible Mother archetype, or the dark aspect of the Great Mother Ireland, as its perennial and ubiquitous presence from the Mórrígan of the Ulster cycle of legend to the Banshee of folklore, and strong meaning in Ireland through the ages, traversing more than 200 years of Irish literature from Romanticism through to the 21st century. Thanks very much.